So today we're going to look at NL4s. This is an NL4 connector. Sometimes these are called, you'll hear these called speak-on connectors, which is also technically accurate, but the problem is that there's more than one configuration of speak-on. This is a 4-conductor speak-on connector, but you can get 2-conductor ones, you can get 8-conductor ones. And so most of us prefer to just refer to it by the model number, which is NL4, because that is way more descriptive of what we're actually dealing with. For the 4 meaning 4 conductors. So this is the part that you have to solder, and it's got, you can see there's 4 holes on it. I'll get back to that in a second. These are used for loudspeakers, and loudspeakers require much thicker cable. So this is going to be, I believe this is 14 gauge cable. Yeah, 13. This is 13 gauge cable, which compared to the other stuff we've done before is like only 22 gauge. So this is much thicker because it has to conduct a lot more electricity, okay? So it works a little bit differently. It's a little bit trickier. So anyway, we'll get there. Now, the first thing is put the boot on, okay? Sorry. Okay, so you've got 2 strain release here, a white one and a black one. Which one you use depends on how thick of a cable you're using. We'll get to that in a little bit, so just set those aside for now. This is the little barrel that you'll slide onto it. You don't do that till it's done. So we'll set that aside. This is the part that you actually need to connect. Now, by default, this is set up to crimp. And what I mean by that is you would slide an untinned wire into that hole, and then there's little screws here that you screw it down, and it clamps down theoretically hard on that wire, hard enough that it won't come out, which is easier than soldering it for sure. And when you're dealing with, really thick wire like this, that can sometimes work. It's hard to do really effective crimps like that on really thin wire, but it can work like this. But I have found that almost never do all those wires stay in place forever. It's just hard to get those screws tight enough, and it clamps just right, and especially if you tin the wire first, which I've seen some people do that. They'll tin that wire, and then they'll stick it in there, and then try to crimp it, and it doesn't crimp. It doesn't, because it doesn't compress because of the solder that's on there. So you will have much better luck and much better reliability out of this if you solder it. And so, most people who have been doing this long enough have all arrived at the same conclusion that it's worth the hassle to solder these because they're just more reliable and you don't have to worry, which means you have to take them apart a little bit. These are designed to be soldered. They just don't come ready to do that immediately. So remember that one time when I told you to buy a little screwdriver? Well, this is why. So here's my little screwdriver, and I'm just going to unscrew each of these little screws. And once the screw comes out, you're just going to pop out this little spring thing, okay, because you don't need that. That's the thing that crimps it down. You're just going to do this for all 4 of them. Get rid of the screws, get rid of the spring. Get rid of the screw, get rid of the spring. We used to save all these screws and springs because it's like we could, I guess, maybe do something with them someday, but after we've amassed a huge bucket full of them and hadn't thought of anything to do with them over a few years, I don't know that it's worth trying to save them. All right, so the other thing is if you look closely at this, I don't know if you can see it up there, but these are labeled. Like right there says 1 minus, and that one says 1 plus. That one says 2 minus, and that one says 2 plus. So that's how they're labeled. So you're doing positive, negative for two different signals, signal 1 and signal 2. And you'll notice the cable here has 4 wires in it. So great, we can do this. So I'm going to hang on to this for a second, set that aside, and let's strip this off. You okay? So same deal as before. You're going to strip off about 1 inch of this with your knife. Be very careful because there is nothing but this jacket between your knife and the inner wires. But the good news is this jacket is a lot easier to cut through than that Belden is. I'm gonna, same thing that for before, just very lightly with your knife. You're just trying to encourage it to split open. Until you see those wires peek out, or the jackets of them peek out at least. There it goes. It's very satisfying when it splits open for the first time. Okay. There we go. Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Twist that off. There is a little bit of paper that might still be there, but all right. So now you got the 4 wires. You've got a white one, a black one, a red one, and a green one. So we're going to go ahead and strip these. Again, you're going to strip about half of this off. You got to be careful not. This is tricky because if you leave these too long, you won't. The little strain relief boot won't be gripping in the right place. So you really, if this is about 1 inch I took off, I'm really going to strip half of this. Okay, so that's pretty important. You're going to try to twist it nice and straight and tight, and I'll do it for the other ones, and try to get them all the same length, as close as you can. That'll make your life easier. If they're all stripped to a different length, you're going to have some problems. And it's mainly about the distance between this outer jacket and where the inner jacket ends. You want those to be consistent. If the wires themselves are a little bit longer, that's just because of how the cable is cut off the spool. So you're going to fix that, but you want the 2 jackets to hit the same spot as close as possible. Or it's just going to be a little tricky when you start implementing the connector into the equation. That's close enough. And I'll do the red one. Okay, so now I'm going to tin these by putting them in my vise and spread them out a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. Now, this is going to be very much like tinning the drain wire on the other connectors you've done so far. So let me make sure this is behaving. It seems like it. So, however, if you go too slow, this is untinned wire here, which means it's really going to soak up the solder. And if you go too slow, the solder will soak back underneath the jacket, which can cause you a number of problems. The first problem is it's going to melt your jacket, which is what leads to the problem that you had. Is too much heat goes back there because the solder goes back there, and then that jacket just falls apart, and that's a huge bummer. The other problem is if that solder goes back in there and then cools, it creates it's a potential fracture point that affects the strain relief, and it can break off really easily, because you want the tinned part to be inside of that lug, not sticking out of the lug, because then it becomes brittle and it can break, and that would be bad. So you want to try to do this slow enough that you tin it fully, but not so slow that it soaks back into the lug. So I'm going to get a little bit on here. I'm going to start heating up this wire, and I'll hold there till it starts soaking in, and then I'm going to start encouraging it forward. No globbies, okay? Keep the bubble moving. Okay, now what I want you to notice here is I didn't let the solder go up under the wire, or under the jacket. Okay? I don't know if you can see that very well, but I can still see the untinned copper just barely poking through that jacket, and that's super important. Don't let that solder suck back in under there, okay? All right, let me do the other ones. Okay. And I'm just gonna spin that a little bit so I can get that pointed down. I'll do this white one. All right, these require quite a bit more solder than some of the other things you've done, so just be ready for that. And the last one. So what I'm waiting for here is I'm waiting for the wire to heat up enough that it starts accepting the solder. So that's that line between going not too fast, but not too slow. So you want to go slow enough that the wire heats up and starts soaking the solder in, but not so slow that it starts creeping up into the jacket. All right, those are done. Now, let's get the actual connector now. I'm going to stick this in here. Now, this is tricky because it's a pretty big lug. And what I like to do is, just like that wire has to heat up in order for it to accept the solder, so does this little lug. That metal has to be hot in order for the solder to stick to it. So what I do is I stick my soldering iron on that little hole where the screw used to be. And I let it sit there for a second. And then, as it starts to heat up, I feed the solder in through the hole below. And I'm just kind of waiting for that lug to heat up enough that it'll start taking the solder. It hasn't quite got there yet. Come on. Oh, there it goes, there it goes. Now I'm just gonna shove a bunch in there. A lot more than you think. Okay. All right, now I'll let's see if I can turn it so y'all can see what I'm doing. The other challenge here is to not melt the plastic. So you got to get the iron on the lug without touching the plastic. That's super important, because you start melting that plastic and all kinds of problems creep up. Okay, I'm trying to move this so you can see it. Come on. It's a lot of metal that has to heat up here. So what I just did was I stuck it on the top a little bit, just so the solder can start sticking in that, help transfer some heat. All right, there we go. And we'll turn it over and do the other side. Turn this and get this one in the right spots. So just be very mindful of how you're positioning this iron so that you don't melt the plastic. Excellent. All right, this is ready. So now I just need to cut these down. And you want, again, the jacket to touch the lug. So we're going to cut these down pretty short. Like that. Okay? All right, here is the colors code that I made up. Doesn't really matter which wire goes to which lug as long as it's the same on both ends. But just in case we end up having to fix another person's cable or something, white goes to 1 plus, black goes to 1 minus. Red goes to 2 plus, and green goes to 2 minus. I will repeat. White goes to 1 plus, black goes to 1 minus. Red goes to 2 plus, green goes to 2 minus. Got it? Okay. So I have, conveniently, I have the 1 plus pointed up right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And I'm going to orient these wires so that I've got the white and the black together and the red and the green together. Now, what we're going to do is same thing. We're just going to heat up the lug, slide this in, and let it go. But you can't stick this wire in there until the lug has fully heated up and that solder has started to pool. Okay? If you stick the wire on there first and try to heat up the lug, what's going to happen? Your jacket will melt. Why? Because all that heat's going to start getting transferred to this wire. Okay? Instead of the lug. Okay? So hold it on here and let the lug heat up. And then you're looking inside that hole, and you'll see eventually that solder will start to flow again. And when you see it, it'll go bleh. And when it goes bleh, that's when you put this wire in, okay? I'm waiting, it hasn't done it yet. Ooh, it's starting to move, I see it. It's unfolding. It's flowing. Okay, it's flowed. Now I will slide this in all the way as far as it'll go. I will hold it for a second for that wire to heat up, and then I will lift off, and I will hold it in place. And it will slowly cool, and oop, it didn't do it. So it didn't actually melt with it because I don't have enough solder in the lug. Okay, I was worried about that. So I'm going to tin this a little bit more. This happens. I'm going to feed a little bit more in there. While I'm sitting here, I'm going to go ahead and leave the iron on there until it cools some more. Now I'm going to slide this up. There it goes. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Now I'll rotate this slightly and we'll do the black one. Do I have enough solder on that? Looks like it, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to preemptively just kind of start shaping this wire to get it to line up there. If you can do this without your pliers, that's better, just because the pliers will mangle this jacket. So if you can kind of get it there, get it fast enough, that's awesome. But, you know, don't burn your finger off. And if you need to use the pliers, go ahead and use it. But if you can get to the point where you don't have to, I have found you will get better results. All right, I'm gonna hold it there and wait for that solder to flow. It's going, it's moving, it's getting shiny. Okay, put it in there, hold it. Okay, now I'll do the other side. Okay, I want the red there and the green over there. Start lining this up, getting it ready. I'm gonna tip my vise a little bit so I can see inside that lug a little bit better. Oh yeah. It's gonna be great. Notice I'm not touching the plastic. I'm waiting, I'm watching that solder inside of the hole, waiting for it to go shiny and start flowing again. There it goes. Ooh, that was cool. It like blobbed. It's like a bubble burst. That was very cool. Okay. There we go. Last one. This is the trickiest one to get in there. I see it. It's getting shiny. Ooh, it flowed. Go, go, go. All the way, all the way. And hold, hold, hold. Cool, cool, cool. Okay. I don't like that one. know if you can see, but it doesn't look like the solder flowed very well in there. Don't like that one at all. Well, yeah, I'm going to heat it up again, and I'm going to feed a little bit of solder into that hole and see if I can flood it a little bit better. Yeah, just from the top a little bit. Well, it will drop down into that hole once it heats up enough. There it goes. See it fall down in there? Let's see if that heated it up enough to stick better. The bottom still doesn't look great, but I think the wire has attached. It's you know, melded enough together that I think it's going to be okay. All right. There we go. Whew, hot. Okay. This jacket is thick enough that you're going to need the black strain relief because this white one's just too small. So there is a little split in this that it's going to be a little tricky, but you got to really get it around there. Okay. Now, there is a very specific way that this goes on. There's this little arrow on here, and that arrow should line up with that gap between the white and the black. Okay? And it just fits together like that. And then this is keyed, so it'll only go in one way. You're going to have to rotate a little bit until it slots in place, and then push it all the way in. Keep going, keep going. You want this really tight so that that strain relief will clamp down on that. There you go. Ideally, you don't want any gap between there. Okay? All right, should we test it? Yes, Jason.
Yeah, let's test it. One.
Focus. Focus. Okay, there we go. Okay, 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Congratulations.
I usually like to just kind of yank on them a little bit. Make sure that that strain relief is working and the wire's didn't slide out somewhere. All right, it's good. Okay, that's how you do it. Be prepared to do a few tries of this. Just don't melt that plastic on that connector. There are a couple problems that will create for you. One problem is it'll destroy your soldering kit, which is not great. The other problem is it will mangle that thing to the point where you can't get that strain relief on there anymore. And then you'll have a beautiful soldered connection and you got to cut it off because you can't get the boot on. Okay? Don't melt plastic. Questions? Okay.